Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. And if you've been following the series, you know that we're at the beginning of a new batch of mandolins, more or less. And so we are at the head of the line, so to speak, of all the construction processes. And so I kept a diary this week so that I could just kind of read down the list of things that I'd done in order. And so here we go. I started this week with picking up where we left off last week with the binding on mandolins number 1 and 2 in the batch. Mandolin number 1 is an oval hole mandolin with cream colored ivory binding, and mandolin number 2 is an R5 Country Boy with black binding. And so I wrapped the next piece of binding on each of those mandolins Monday morning, and then I went and started with the 6 remaining bodies that we have that are still generic bodies. And by that I mean that they don't have any, they don't have a number assigned to them yet. They could be any mandolin in the batch at this point, because all we have is the sides are bent and the top is put on, and everything is still very, very rough. So let's just work those down the line in the processes that it takes to get those things ready for binding. And to do that, the first thing we have to do is trim off the excess top wood. After that, then, it's time to run it through the little jig that cuts the neck joint. And also, I have a pin router that I use to rough out the F-holes, and they are pretty rough after that. There's a lot of fuzz and stuff, so that needs to be cleaned off and trimmed up and everything. And that pretty much took all of my Monday. My students showed up not too long after that, and so I didn't really get all of those F-holes trimmed up, and I guess I'll just have to pick back up where I left off on Tuesday. Now, Tuesday starts, and I'm not really going to pick up where I left off. I'm going to go back to the head of the line and wrap the binding on mandolins number 1 and 2. And this turns out to be the last piece of binding on both of those mandolins. So they're all bound now. They're rough, and they need to be cleaned up, excess glue squeeze out, and all that kind of stuff. But we won't do anything else to them today. We'll pick back up on that on Wednesday. So after gluing and wrapping those 2 pieces of binding on those 2 mandolins, then I go back and start finishing up the cleaning up of the F-holes and all that sort of thing. And then it's time to saw out the scrolls, because none of that's been done yet either. None of the little fine detail work is done. So we'll saw those scrolls out, and then I will start setting the binding heights around the scroll and doing the slope from the high to the low, and carving out that flute carving there in the scroll, and get it at least roughed out and ready to cut the binding slots. And you know what? That took pretty much all of my Tuesday. And we'll pick back up with it tomorrow morning, Wednesday. Wednesday starts out with a trip to the post office, and then back to the shop to clean up mandolins number 1 and 2. And by that I mean they just come unwrapped, all the wrapping string comes off, and then you just tackle it with scrapers and all that sort of thing. Heavy grit sandpaper, I usually start with 60, and at this stage I will clean everything up, get all the humps out, work it down from the 60 grit all the way down to about 120. At this point I don't think it's any benefit to go any more than that. And then just lay those two, and mandolins number 1 and number 2 got done that way. And so I will lay those off to the side to await the next step in the process, which is install the neck. So they're ready for that, but we're not going to do that just now. We're going to go back and finish the binding on those other 6, but we'll have to wait now until Thursday because Wednesday has just run out. Thursday starts, and I have actually 3 of those holder jigs, so I can put 1, 2, 3 mandolins in the holders jigs and be binding on 3 of those mandolins at the same time. And so now's the time to say, okay, this mandolin gets tortoiseshell binding, and this mandolin gets this, and this mandolin gets that, because number 7 needs this, and number 6 needs that. And so the mandolins that I have picked to bind first is mandolin number 4, number 8, and number 9. Number 4, I think, has a black, white, black binding all over, and number 8 and 9, I think, are going to just be white. And so that took all day Thursday just to get started on that job and get them all situated out and get the binding slots started. And now it's Friday, and I'm getting ready to go back in there and pick right back up where I started off yesterday, cutting binding slots in those 3 mandolin bodies and wrapping the first pieces of binding on. And if I happen to get done with that, then I'll start pulling the necks and stuff for mandolins 1 and 2. But I don't think that's going to happen, not today. That's too much work to fill out one whole day with. So most likely we'll get to the necks in next week's video. And speaking of next week's video, I certainly hope you will come back and spend a little bit of time with me next week on the next episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. I hope to see you then.